So hello and welcome to both of you. Maybe we should begin with your vision. How do you see the next few years in your countries and what's your action plans?
Should I start?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. The second time that I'm participating at this forum. Unfortunately, during the last 2 years it was not possible, so I'm glad that I can be again in Israel. How do we see our country, especially after this 1.5 year or almost 2 years? I think that we needed to reconsider many things. Definitely Hungary put on the front side the innovation or the innovation ability, high technologies, and modifying the university system. We went through now a large-scale university restructuring. We have taken out the universities from the state household. Well, they are now functioning as private universities, similar to Israel. The state didn't let them far away because the financing based on sort of agreement is further on there, but they should function in a different way. We also increased the financing. In fact, we doubled from this year to the next year. And similar happened to the Innovation and Research Fund. Actually, we doubled also the Hungarian contribution to that. So the financial and legally, this is there. The Hungarian industry is considered to be a high-tech industry as far as the production and the products are concerned. So we need to support it also from this side. And well, we are not going to have more people than we have, 10 million roughly. So there is only one way we want to keep it our pace on. It's basically to improve productivity in a way that we will serve the technology.
So if you're talking about the Ministry of Innovation and Science focus on policy, you could have seen it already in the budget bill where we dedicated a chapter regarding the innovation and technology. I think what the COVID-19 crisis showed the Israeli government that the Israeli economy is dependent on the high technology and science market in Israel. This is not something like a cherry at the top or a privilege, and this is an industry that Israel depends upon if we're talking about taxes, if we're talking about resources, if we're talking about the flourishment of this industry. We saw an amazing phenomenon where around the world everybody witnessed a huge economic crisis while our high-tech industry boomed. We are finishing 2021 record-breaking in the numbers of IPOs, of unicorns, of startup, and the high technology markets is amazing. But alongside this success, I think we have a social challenge, because when we look at the inclusion of manpower in the high technology industry, first of all, it suffers from a manpower problem, the labor problem power. But this challenge builds on a social challenge, because when we look at the underrepresented populations, we see the Israeli Arabic population, we see women that are not enough included in this industry. We're looking at the Israeli periphery cities. So we are focusing, and I'm focusing first of all about the manpower challenge in the high technology market. And we have initiated already and launched program regarding easier visas, addressing junior problems. I'm working with the Ministry of Treasury, with the Minister of Treasury, with the Finance Minister about tax benefits for people that we want to bring back to Israel. And we are still working on a governmental plan. So this is one aspect. And the second aspect is, of course, to keep supporting the high technology and science industry. This morning, we launched a new innovation ministry set in Jerusalem by the Colombian government in a ceremony together with the President of Colombia in order to create an easier gate for Israeli technology and science companies to Latin America. And only an hour ago, we signed another scientific cooperation agreement with His Excellency, the Minister of Hungary. And I think that the future is in also international collaborations. We see it, for example, in the AI area, where the regulation and the standards are illustrative of international challenges. And we should go by the international, I think, standards so that the high-tech industry and the science industry will have a comfortable environment to work with.
So now I'll ask you to be a bit more specific, because innovation is a very nice headline, but it involves a lot of subjects and fields. What's your strategy? In what fields do you prefer to invest as a government, as a minister?
In Hungary, 4 years ago, we elaborated different technological platforms. We assessed the global challenges, what is relevant from them to Hungary, what are the technological fields which are going to be representative in our, industry economy, but industry economy as well. And we identified fields like Industry 4.0. So this is robotization. This is already has a relationship with already mentioned productivity. Artificial intelligence, we elaborated the strategy 2 years ago and started the deployment of the strategy. It includes many things. It includes the legal environment, how are we going to deal with public data, with private data, how do we generate the background for that, for example, the computing power. We started to develop HPCs to a level of about 50 petaflops capacity, huge capacity. So this is going on. We had a look at other cutting-edge technologies like hydrogen, for example, that's for Hungary as an interim storage, as we have heard in the previous presentation, but also as a fuel plays a very important role if we want to reach our 2050 target, where we have a good chance to reach it, but we need to deal with that today. Battery technology, we are going to have the second largest battery production capacity in Hungary. 5G as communication, but it's more than communication, so this is the background for the future industries. So these are all the fields or the technological fields where we are investing. We produce the legal environment and also the government, the state support, the subsidies which are given to companies. This goes all in this direction. Of course, investment is one thing, money is just money, but you need to generate the necessary innovation background. So we consider the universities, which could be the focal points of that. Not only the academic research which is going on the university, but actually we were not very creative. We copied it from Israel. We established the network of the science parks, which are on the side of the university and combines the university with the industry. So here we invest quite a lot of money. For horizontal cooperation, we established the network of the national laboratories in all those fields which are relevant for the Hungarian state. Some of the mentioned ones, but there are also human elements of that. So these are all the investments, what we are doing and the actual issues.
Would you say you invest enough?
I would say no. So we should invest more. But if I compare it for the status of, let's say, 2 years, then there is a significant investment. Just giving you an example, this university model change will not only include the doubling of the financing, but the universities are going to get roughly 7 billion euros in the next 3 years. It's a huge amount for the University of Hungary, which is for their infrastructural equipment development. So we could invest more, but if I compare it to the other investments, it's always, Israel and Hungary, there are two different countries, but if I compare it to other investments, then this is currently a huge investment. It should be more actually, but that's the target.
In that aspect, I want to say before we're talking about the technological priorities, my passion is with regards to education of the kids of Israel. And I'm pushing forward together with the Minister of Education an initiation that every child in Israel will be able to enjoy as part of his mandatory education program, not on afternoon classes to the ones who are strong and so on, to learn another language of computing, of technology and so on. When we look at the best competing countries with Israel with regards to high technology, they all have the same programs. And that, in my view, would also be a tool to social mobility in the periphery kids of Israel that unfortunately don't have the same opportunity to achieve and to get a job or to be a part and included of the high technology market. But when we're talking about technologies, we can say that the government of Israel at the moment is very focused on AI. Last week I was in a visit at the OECD and with the Ministry of France of Innovation and Technology and Education regarding collaboration with the issues of AI. I was appointed by the government in a cabinet resolution to lead the policy and the regulation. AI is a fundamental part of the high-tech industry in Israel over many companies. It is on the basis of almost every technology, and it arises a lot of ethical questions of privacy and so on. And in that sense, we want to be part of the work internationally. And on the infrastructure level, there is a great work done by the Innovation Authority, the Defense Ministry, the Council of High Education, and they are already launching an RFI with regards to high-performance computer in Israel, of a development of LNG, it's from my previous world of energy, but LNP, NLP from English and in Arabic and Hebrew, so that we will have another basis in Israel. And the third thing is about the human resources, and that will be led by the Academic Council. With regards to other areas of national priorities in technology, I appointed the Research and Development Council in Israel, the MOLMOP, which is consisted of all academia and industry people, to prepare recommendation to the State of Israel of national priorities of the State of Israel that has to do with the technological areas. The criteria that they got was to look at what the world is focused on, but also where Israel has strategic advantages, because we're also committed to our industry and we want our industry to get the best advantage that it can. So we're of course talking about, when we're talking about the Innovation Authority, it is everywhere, Meditech, climate, bioconvergence, and fintech, and so on. And you know, the sky is the limit, I think, when we are talking about the Israeli technology industry.
So if to be even more specific, we are in a Smart Mobility Convention, and we've been talking a lot about autonomous vehicles. Would you please describe the timeline in each country? How do you see, in terms, of course, of regulation and legislation, how do you see the timeline of autonomous vehicles in your countries?
Well, Hungary is doing quite well with this specific field of our automotive industry. Automotive industry is the strongest one in Hungary. It represents roughly 25% of the Hungarian output, so that's significant. And not only production, but also research and development. We've just recently calculated that the number of the engineers who are dealing with autonomous and electrified vehicle development, it's exceeded the 10,000. So this is a huge number. That was the reason that the Hungarian government 4 years ago decided to build the world's most modern validation facility for autonomous vehicles, not only for road vehicles, but also for low-altitude vehicles, drones, their cooperative control, and also for off-road vehicles. So this work is being finished at the end of this year. Currently, we have a testing facility which is fully digitalized. That means that we can fully control the testing facility as well, that they are able to define different type of scenarios where they put the autonomous vehicle in. We also, 5 years ago, opened the Hungarian roads for testing any level of autonomous vehicles up to level 5, provided that the company who's dealing with that is on a certain level, and also the maturity level of the prototype reached B sample, C sample somewhere. So that is going on, and I would think that to resolve the future mobility issues, not only the driveline, the only player, so all greening the driveline, electrifying and so on, but how not to lose energy in an improper driving base. So that's why the autonomous systems, they are offering many other opportunities, utilization of the road infrastructure, so I can get the vehicles closer to each other, not having disturbances, not having accidents, because I can avoid with these systems, to operate the vehicle in a more stationary mode, and not having transients which consumes energy regardless of what the energy is. So I think that it is the way where we are going. Currently, I would say that with level 3 vehicles we are able to reach quite a good level, so the technology is there. Still there is some hesitation from the community side whether we should do it or not, but I think that if all these targets we want to reach, then we need to trust in this technology, and the technology is ready for that.
The smart mobility industry in Israel is world leading again, and we're talking about over 600 companies that are dealing with this area. If we're talking about the investments in Israeli companies in that area, of course including Mobileye, which is one of the leading companies, we're talking about 25 billion shekels in the last decade. And this is, of course, a leading area in Israel. What we do in order to help it is, first of all, we promoted a sandbox legislation. If I'm correct, it is the first of a kind in Israel. And what it means to do is basically to create an ability to the Israeli companies to experiment their innovations and technicalities and their products in the real world without having to transfer these branches internationally, as we unfortunately see. So I hope this is helpful. And when we're talking about AI, which is a very significant part of every smart mobility industry. So like I said, we are preparing the infrastructure in Israel. We defined it as an international priority. In the technology area, we are progressing with the regulations so that the companies will feel okay. And of course, we have all the, the subsidies and the support that we give. And I hope that we will continue to be leading. When we're talking about smart mobility, it has to do with across of all realms of life. If we're talking about the drones, if we're talking about aviation, it's not only transportation, in the roads, but if we succeed in that challenge of supporting this industry, we are also helping the climate and the emission targets in Israel. It has to do also with the energy sector challenges. We have to do a lot of regulation in that regards also when we're talking about also other supportive area of the government. And of course, we need to do better with the interactions with the government.
We didn't manage to talk about so many subjects, but our time is up. So thank you very much, both ministers, for coming here today.
I just want to say something that is not purely technological. Mm-hmm. I think that the amazing status that Israel has in the area of technology is not only an economic, advantage. It is also a great diplomatic advantage that shows Israel in a place that is outside of a political conflict, doing so much good for the world in climate, in health, in every area of humankind. And I will try to harness it a little bit more in order to create the bridges between other countries and the state of Israel, because that's what we should do.
And we try to learn from Israel.
Thank you so much for both of you.